When a billionaire's daughter secretly stopped her car to talk to a homeless man with a piece of chalk, nobody could have imagined what would happen next. What started as a strange street corner lesson turned into a revelation so powerful, it left an entire city stunned, and forced even the richest man in town to rethink everything he believed about wealth, dignity, and trust. The boulevard roared with Monday chaos, honking cars, vendors shouting, people rushing to work. At the curb, a convoy of black SUVs idled, spotless and imposing. Inside one sat Arya Hale, the 12-year-old daughter of billionaire Victor Hale. She had her tablet open, earbuds dangling, but her attention wandered outside. Across the street, crouched on the pavement, was a man. His coat was old, his shoes worn, and his beard carried streaks of gray. But he wasn't begging. With a stub of chalk, he drew a chessboard on the concrete, carefully arranging bottle caps as makeshift pieces. People ignored him, stepping around like he was invisible. Arya's eyes stayed fixed on him, on the quiet focus in his movements. Just then her school bag slipped from the seat and spilled onto the sidewalk. A silver chess knight keychain dangled from the zipper. The man picked it up before the guard could react. "Yours?" he said simply, handing it back. His voice was calm, steady, strangely dignified. "You play?" he asked, nodding at the keychain. "A little," she murmured. He smiled faintly. "Then be careful. Your knight's loose." Before she could ask what he meant, the guard shoved the bag into her hands and pushed the man back. But as the SUV rolled on, Arya glanced over her shoulder. For the first time in her life, she wanted to meet a stranger again. Arya couldn't stop thinking about him. The man hadn't looked at her with pity, envy, or fake politeness, only curiosity. So the next afternoon, as her SUV rolled past the boulevard, she leaned forward. "Stop here," she told the driver. The guard frowned. "Your father wouldn't approve." "Just 5 minutes." Her tone was sharper than usual. She stepped out, heart thudding. The man looked up from his chalkboard. His eyes, though weary, carried the sharpness of someone who once taught for a living. "You again," he said. "You said my knight was loose yesterday," she challenged. "Let's see if you can solve this." She held out her math assignment. He didn't take it. "If I solve it, you learn nothing. My rule, I don't carry people's bags. I show them how to carry their own." Confused but intrigued, Arya watched as he drew 4 chalk boxes linked with arrows. He placed a pebble in the first. "This is your number. You want to reach the last box. How many ways can it move if it jumps only 2 or 3 steps?" She crouched, studying the puzzle. Minutes passed, mistakes, erasures, retries. Then her eyes lit. 8. He nodded. "You carried it yourself." The guard stormed forward. "Miss Hale, away from him." But Arya straightened and without hesitation declared, "He's my tutor." For a moment even the city noise seemed to pause. A homeless man had just taught the daughter of a billionaire. The Hale penthouse towered above the glittering city skyline, all glass walls and polished marble floors. Arya sat across the dining table from her father, Victor Hale, who was scrolling through numbers on a sleek tablet while sipping a glass of mineral water. The table was set for 3, but, as usual, it was just the 2 of them in silence. "Dad," Arya began carefully. "I met someone today. A teacher. On the street." Victor glanced up, one brow raised. "On the street?" "Yes. He taught me how to solve a math problem, with chalk on the pavement." Arya's voice brightened as she spoke. "He's really smart. He could teach me more than any app." Victor's hand cut the air, dismissing her excitement. "Arya, if you need a tutor, I'll hire the best. World class. Not some wanderer." "He's not just a wanderer," she protested. "He made me understand, not just memorize. Isn't that what learning should be?" Victor sighed, setting down his tablet. His tone softened, but his words remained sharp. "Sweetheart, you don't know who these people are. They could be dangerous. You stay in the car, windows up. Promise me." Arya's jaw tightened. "You don't even want to know his name." Rena, Victor's efficient chief of staff, entered with a folder. "Sir, we should discuss the donor list for your birthday gala," she said briskly, barely acknowledging Arya. "Also, there are paparazzi photos of Miss Hale near some vagrants. Bad optics." Victor frowned, already moving on. "Handle it, Rena." Arya lowered her gaze, her excitement crumbling into frustration. Once again her father's world was about image, not people. But inside, her decision hardened. If he wouldn't listen, she'd keep learning on her own. The city's noise felt different when Arya walked it on foot. She slipped from the tinted security bubble of her father's SUV and found herself beneath the shadow of an old underpass. That's where she discovered Musa's classroom. It wasn't much, just a cracked milk crate stacked with worn paperbacks, a chipped thermos and a wide patch of pavement scrubbed clean where he drew with chalk. Yet to Arya it felt alive. Musa welcomed her with a nod, no questions asked. He set up a chessboard, mismatched pieces rattling in a tin box. Today, he said, strategy. He placed pawns forward, then asked, why sacrifice this one? Arya hesitated. Because, sometimes losing one piece lets you win the game? Exactly. Life isn't about keeping everything. It's about knowing what matters most. From there, the lessons unfolded like scenes stitched together. At a market stall, Musa haggled for fruit. First, ask the seller's story. Price is numbers, value is people. Arya followed his lead, earning a smile and 2 apples instead of 1. On the curb, he showed her how to repair a loose shoelace instead of replacing it. Repair is memory. New things can't teach you what the old ones have endured. With coins divided into jars on the ground, he taught her budgeting. Spend, save, share. A balanced board wins the game. When she grew restless, he asked her to study faces of strangers walking by. Don't judge their clothes. Watch their eyes. That's where the truth hides. By the time the sun dipped low, Arya's journal pages were filled with notes. These weren't lessons from textbooks. They were lessons of life, and she wanted more. The cafeteria buzzed with noise, trays clattering, laughter echoing, a dozen conversations crashing into one another. Arya sat at her usual table, surrounded by classmates who mostly ignored her except when they needed homework answers or wanted to see the newest gadget her father bought. Today, one boy proudly waved around a sleek, limited-edition tablet. Cost more than your dad's car, he bragged. His friends gasped, leaning closer. Normally, Arya would have stayed quiet. But Musa's voice whispered in her memory, price is numbers. Value is people. She stood, steadying her tray. Do you even know what it's worth? She asked. The boy smirked. Of course. It's the most expensive one. No, Arya said firmly. It's only worth what it does for you. If all you use it for is games, then it's just an overpriced toy. Her classmates snickered. The boy flushed. But Arya wasn't finished. She glanced at the food waste piling up near the trash bins. Half-eaten sandwiches, untouched fruit, unopened milk cartons. She marched over, pulling a box from the recycling bin. Let's see real value, she said, stacking untouched items inside. Who wants to trade? At first, kids stared in disbelief. But soon, someone swapped chips for an apple, another exchanged juice for a sandwich. Laughter shifted from mockery to curiosity. Even the cafeteria supervisor paused, eyebrows raised at the small movement building around Arya. By the time lunch ended, a single crate of rescued food sat ready for the after-school shelter program. Arya felt a rush of pride. These weren't just Musa's lessons anymore, they were hers to pass on. For the first time, she wasn't the billionaire's daughter. She was a leader. The city looked different at dawn, muted, raw, stripped of its glitter. Arya slipped out with her driver still half asleep, insisting she just wanted to see the sunrise. But she directed him toward a downtown lot where Musa often stayed. Instead of calm, she found chaos. Workers in orange vests moved briskly, taping eviction notices to lampposts, piling tents and blankets into trucks. Plastic bags with personal belongings spilled into the gutter. A woman shouted, "My meds. My meds are in there." Arya froze. This wasn't the quiet underpass classroom. This was destruction. Then she spotted him. Musa was standing tall, voice calm, trying to reason with the workers. Please let people take their things first. These aren't garbage. These are lives. A worker shoved him back. The woman's bag of medicine teetered on the edge of the truck. Arya darted forward instinctively, snatching it before it fell. Stop. You can't just throw this away. Her voice cracked with both fear and fury. Everyone turned, the workers, Musa, even the driver rushing after her. For a moment, time froze. The billionaire's daughter standing in the middle of a homeless sweep, clutching a stranger's belongings. A black SUV pulled up sharply. The door opened and Victor Hale stepped out, fury etched across his face. Arya. His voice thundered. What are you doing here? Arya's chest heaved, but she held the bag tight. Seeing what you refuse to see, she shot back. Musa placed a steady hand on her shoulder, easing her trembling. Anger is loud, child, he murmured. But change is patient. Victor's jaw clenched. Get in the car. Now. Arya obeyed, but as she slid inside, her eyes burned with determination. She had seen too much to ever look away again. The clinic smelled faintly of antiseptic and old paper. Arya sat in a stiff chair, swinging her legs nervously while Musa lay on a cot nearby. He had faint bruises from being shoved during the sweep, but his eyes were alert, watching her father argue with the nurse at the front desk about liability and insurance. When Victor finally stepped out to take a call, Musa motioned Arya closer. His voice was low, steady, as if he'd waited years for someone to actually listen. "I wasn't always here," he began. "I was a teacher. Mathematics at Lincoln High. Loved it. My students, some of them still write me letters, though I have no address for replies." His lips twitched in a sad smile. "What happened?" Arya whispered. "Life," Musa said simply. He tapped his chest. "Wife got sick. Insurance didn't cover enough. I worked extra jobs but the bills swallowed us whole. She passed and I broke. Lost the house, lost the job. One bad fall after another." He looked at his rough hands. "This is where I landed." Arya's throat tightened. "But you're brilliant. You should still be teaching." "I am teaching," Musa corrected gently, gesturing to the chalk-stained pavement visible through the clinic window. "Only now my classroom is smaller, and my students are whoever stops long enough to learn." Silence stretched between them, thick with weight. Arya finally said, "You don't belong on the street." Musa chuckled softly. "No one does, child. But until the world remembers that, we keep drawing our lessons where we can." Victor returned just then, his voice sharp. "Enough, Arya. Say goodbye. This man is not your concern." But Arya's eyes didn't waver. For her, Musa had become more than a concern. He was a teacher who had given her truth. The Hale Foundation Gala was the city's crown jewel. Crystal chandeliers glittered above, waiters glided with silver trays, and guests in designer suits traded laughter that sounded rehearsed. Cameras flashed as billionaires congratulated each other for their charity. Victor Hale stood at the center, every inch the titan, with Arya at his side in a polished dress. Yet while the adults discussed stock indices and new ventures, Arya's mind drifted to Musa's chalk-stained fingers, his lessons, his truth. When the host invited Arya to say a few words, the next generation of Hale leadership, Victor beamed proudly, expecting a polite thank you. But Arya stepped up to the microphone, her small voice cutting through the murmurs. "You all talk about giving," she began, "but today I saw people losing everything they own. I saw food thrown in trash that could have fed them. And I met a teacher, yes, a homeless man, who taught me more about value and kindness than I've learned in any of my classrooms." Gasps rippled through the hall. Journalists scribbled furiously. Victor's smile froze, his jaw tightening. "His name is Musa," Arya continued, her voice steadier now. "And if any of you actually want to understand charity, start by seeing the people you ignore." For a moment, silence pressed heavy against the gold-draped walls. Then a guest chuckled awkwardly. Another coughed. But a few, just a few, nodded thoughtfully. Victor stepped forward quickly, placing a hand on Arya's shoulder, guiding her away from the microphone with a stiff smile. "Children speak from the heart," he told the crowd smoothly. "Thank you for humoring her innocence." The applause was polite, controlled. But Arya noticed the flicker in some guests' eyes. Seeds had been planted, whether her father liked it or not. The gala had ended hours ago, but Victor Hale couldn't sleep. The city stretched endlessly beyond the penthouse glass, glowing with neon and shadows. He poured himself a drink, but it sat untouched on the counter. Arya's words echoed in his mind. "A teacher, yes, a homeless man, taught me more about value and kindness." Victor had built his empire on control, efficiency, and power. But as he replayed her speech, he felt a foreign weight pressing against him, doubt. He reached for his tablet, scrolling through old reports he normally ignored. City homelessness rates, shelter funding cuts, eviction notices filed by corporations, including some owned by him. The numbers were cold, but behind them he now saw Musa's face. He remembered the way Musa placed a steady hand on Arya's shoulder, how the man spoke with dignity despite having nothing. Victor thought about his own childhood, his father working double shifts, teaching him to never waste a penny. Somewhere along the way he had forgotten. The next morning, instead of heading to the office, Victor asked his driver to take him downtown. The SUV pulled to a stop near the underpass. Victor stepped out, his polished shoes crunching against broken glass. People eyed him warily, muttering. He was an intruder here. Then he spotted Musa, sketching on the pavement with a piece of chalk, a circle divided into 3 parts. Spend. Share. A small crowd of children watched, listening. Victor hesitated, then approached. "Musa," he said, his voice softer than Arya had ever heard it. Musa looked up, surprised but calm. Mr. Hale. You've come to learn, or to argue? Victor exhaled. To listen. It was the first step. Small but real. Weeks later, the city gathered at a newly renovated park. Once a neglected lot, now buzzing with laughter, chalk drawings and food stalls run by both volunteers and former street dwellers. A small stage stood at the center, draped with a modest banner, Community Classroom. At the heart of it all was Musa, chalk in hand, sketching circles on a giant board while children leaned in eagerly. His mismatched books now filled shelves built beneath shady trees. Adults sat nearby, listening just as intently. Victor Hale stood at the edge of the crowd, not in a suit but in rolled-up sleeves. He had quietly funded the transformation, not as a headline project but as a genuine effort. For once, no photographers had been invited. This was not about image. Arya ran up to Musa, proudly holding a notebook filled with her own lessons. I taught my friends what you showed me, she said, eyes sparkling. They want to help too. Musa's smile was deep, warm. Good. That's how change begins, one student teaching another. Then Victor stepped forward. The crowd hushed. He cleared his throat. Today is not about me, he began, glancing at Musa. It's about the people who've always had wisdom we were too blind to see. I was wrong to ignore them. My daughter reminded me that wealth without empathy is poverty of the soul. A murmur of agreement rippled through the crowd. Musa placed the chalk in Arya's hand. Your turn, he said softly. She looked at the board, then at the expectant faces around her, and drew a new circle, labeling it Hope. The crowd erupted in applause. And in that moment, the billionaire's daughter and the homeless teacher weren't separated by wealth or circumstance. They were united by something greater, the lesson that shocked everyone. True value is measured not by what you own but by what you give.